Roman gold coins, stamped with the face of Emperor Augustus, were found buried in a 1st century tomb in Kyushu, Japan. Rome and Japan never officially met. Never signed a treaty, never exchanged ambassadors, never shared a single written record of contact. And yet, the money got there. That is the power of the ancient trade routes, and we are just getting started. Fact number 1. The Silk Road was not one road, it was a 4,000-mile web of routes spanning 40 countries. When most people hear Silk Road, they picture a single dusty path stretching from China to Rome. Here is the reality: the Silk Road was never one road. It was a sprawling, branching, constantly shifting network of overland and maritime passages that collectively covered more than 4,000 miles, roughly the distance from New York City to London and back again. At its peak, between 100 BCE and 1450 CE, this network touched parts of what are today China, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Egypt, Italy, India, and more, roughly 40 modern countries. Merchants rarely traveled the entire route. Instead, goods passed through relay chains of traders, each handing off cargo to the next. A bolt of Chinese silk might change hands 12 to 15 times before a Roman noblewoman draped it over her shoulders, and she had absolutely no idea where it came from. The Chinese, meanwhile, had no idea Romans existed. They called them Daqin, roughly meaning the great empire in the far west, and treated them as a mythological trading partner they had never directly encountered. Visual note: display an animated infographic map showing the branching overland and sea routes of the Silk Road across a color-coded political geography chart of the ancient world. Fact number 2. Black pepper was so valuable in ancient Rome that it was used to pay ransoms, including Rome's own. Today you shake pepper onto your eggs without thinking twice. In ancient Rome, a single pound of black pepper, Piper nigrum, sourced almost entirely from the Malabar coast of southern India, cost the equivalent of a Roman soldier's monthly salary. But here is where it gets genuinely unbelievable. In 408 CE, when the Visigoth king Alaric I besieged the city of Rome and demanded a ransom to spare the city, his list of demands included 3,000 pounds of pepper alongside 5,000 pounds of gold and 30,000 pounds of silver. Rome paid it. The Senate stripped silver decorations off public statues to make the payment. Pepper, a spice, was literally listed on the same ransom invoice as gold and silver for the capital city of the greatest empire in Western history. The reason pepper was so absurdly expensive was its journey. It traveled by ship from India across the Arabian Sea to ports in Yemen or Egypt, then overland by camel caravan to Alexandria, then by Mediterranean vessel to Rome. A journey of roughly 6,000 miles that took months and passed through the hands of Arab, Persian, and Egyptian middlemen who marked up the price at every single stop. Visual note: show an infographic price comparison chart, pepper cost versus Roman soldiers' wages versus gold price per pound, alongside a route diagram from India to Rome. Fact number 3. China and Rome were simultaneously the world's two largest empires and never officially knew each other existed. In 100 CE, the Roman Empire and the Han Dynasty of China were simultaneously the two largest and most powerful empires on Earth. Rome controlled approximately 5 million square kilometers and 70 million people. The Han Dynasty controlled roughly 6 million square kilometers and, extraordinarily, an estimated 57 million people. These were the twin superpowers of the ancient world. And they were connected by the Silk Road. Silk, glass, gold, and spices flowed between them. And yet, they never made official diplomatic contact for centuries. The reason? The Parthian Empire, roughly modern-day Iran, sat squarely between them and acted as the world's most profitable middleman. The Parthians controlled the overland trade corridor and had zero interest in letting Rome and China cut out the middleman and trade directly. They blocked, intercepted, and redirected diplomatic missions. A Roman embassy did finally reach the Han court in 166 CE, recorded in Chinese annals as a delegation from Daqin sent by their king Onduan, almost certainly Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. It took until 166 CE. By that point, the two empires had been trading goods for over 200 years without a single face-to-face meeting between their governments. Visual note: side-by-side size comparison infographic, Roman Empire versus Han Dynasty territory at 100 CE, with the Parthian Empire highlighted as a geographic buffer zone in contrasting color. Fact number 4. Ancient Indian merchants had a trade network spanning from East Africa to Southeast Asia 2,000 years ago. Here is a fact that completely rewrites the standard Columbus discovered the world was connected narrative. Indian Ocean trade routes were fully operational, commercially sophisticated, and internationally organized at least 2,000 years before European Age of Discovery voyages. Archaeological excavations at the ancient port city of Arikamedu on India's southeastern coast, conducted in the 1940s and expanded in subsequent decades, uncovered Roman pottery, Roman amphorae, and Roman glass beads dated to the 1st century BCE and 1st century CE. Roman merchants were physically present in India. Simultaneously, Indian merchants sailing outward had established trading colonies in East Africa, in modern-day Tanzania and Kenya, and eastward into Southeast Asia, reaching modern-day Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia. Sanskrit inscriptions have been found in Vietnam dated to the 4th century CE. Hindu temple architecture influenced Cambodian design so profoundly that Angkor Wat, built in the 12th century CE, is literally designed as a Hindu cosmological diagram. The Indian Ocean trade network moved cotton, spices, ivory, gold, iron, and timber across a zone stretching roughly 6,000 miles east to west. And it ran on the monsoon winds. Indian and Arab sailors had mapped the seasonal wind patterns of the Indian Ocean well enough to use them as a reliable calendar-based highway across open ocean. Visual note: animated wind pattern infographic overlaid on Indian Ocean map, showing monsoon-driven trade arc from East Africa through India to Southeast Asia, with color-coded goods flow indicators. Fact number 5. The Amber Road carried prehistoric resin from the Baltic Sea to ancient Egypt, 2,500 miles away. You almost certainly know about silken spices. You have probably never heard of amber. Baltic amber, fossilized tree resin millions of years old, washed up on the shores of modern-day Poland, Lithuania, and the Kaliningrad coast, was one of the most prized luxury materials of the ancient world. And it traveled an almost incomprehensible distance to get to its buyers. The Amber Road was a network of trade paths running from the Baltic Sea coast southward through Central Europe, crossing the Alps, descending through Italy, and branching eastward through Greece and into the Middle East and Egypt. The total journey was roughly 2,500 miles. Amber beads have been found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, who died around 1323 BCE. Baltic amber. In an Egyptian pharaoh's grave. 3,500 years ago. Chemical analysis, specifically the identification of succinic acid concentrations unique to Baltic region amber, confirmed beyond doubt that this was not Mediterranean amber or local resin. It came from the far north. The ancient Egyptians, who had trade networks stretching through Nubia and across the Red Sea, were somehow acquiring fossilized tree resin from a coastline more than 2,500 miles away in what is now Lithuania. Visual note: display a map infographic tracing the Amber Road in amber yellow color from the Baltic coast through Europe to Egypt, alongside a chemical composition diagram showing succinic acid concentration as a geographic fingerprint. Fact number 6. Chinese silk was so sought after in Rome that Rome bled money, triggering what some historians call history's first trade deficit crisis. The Romans were absolutely obsessed with Chinese silk. Senators' wives demanded it. Emperors wore it. It became a symbol of status so intense that the Roman Senate literally passed laws, sumptuary laws, attempting to ban men from wearing silk because it was considered too feminine and too decadent. The laws failed. Nobody stopped wearing it. But here is the economic catastrophe hiding inside this fashion obsession. Rome had almost nothing that China or the intermediate trading nations actually wanted in return. China wanted Roman gold and silver. The middlemen, Persian, Arab, and Indian traders, wanted Roman gold and silver. And Rome kept paying it. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder, writing around 77 CE, calculated that Rome was hemorrhaging approximately 100 million sesterces per year to the east on luxury goods, silk, spices, and gems. To put that in scale, a Roman legionary earned around 1,200 sesterces per year. Rome was draining the equivalent of 83,000 soldiers' annual salaries every single year, year after year, into a trade deficit for luxury imports. Some economic historians now argue this relentless gold drain was one of the contributing factors to the currency debasement and economic instability that plagued the Roman Empire in its later centuries. Visual note: animated bar chart infographic showing Roman trade balance, imports versus exports to the east, with currency debasement timeline overlaid, using contrasting red deficit bars against blue export bars. Fact number 7. A single ancient shipwreck found off Turkey contains cargo from at least 7 different cultures, simultaneously. In 1982, a sponge diver off the coast of Uluburun, Turkey, spotted something strange on the seafloor at a depth of about 44 to 61 meters. What he had found was the Uluburun shipwreck, a late Bronze Age trading vessel that sank around 1300 BCE, making it approximately 3,300 years old. What the excavation team from the Institute of Nautical Archaeology pulled out of that wreck over 11 years of diving remains one of the most staggering archaeological discoveries in history. The ship's cargo contained 10 tons of Cypriot copper ingots, 1 ton of tin ingots from Afghanistan or Central Asia. The tin and copper would have been alloyed together to make bronze, Canaanite jars filled with terebinth resin from the Middle East, ebony wood from Egypt, hippopotamus ivory, elephant ivory from Africa, Egyptian blue glass ingots, Baltic amber beads, Mycenaean Greek pottery, Canaanite gold jewelry, and a scarab bearing the name of Egyptian Queen Nefertiti. 1 ship. 1 cargo hold. Materials sourced from Cyprus, Afghanistan, Egypt, Africa, Greece, Canaan, and the Baltic region, at minimum 7 distinct cultural and geographic zones, all loaded onto a single vessel, sailing the Mediterranean in 1300 BCE. This was not primitive barter between neighboring villages. This was sophisticated, multi-continental international commerce operating more than 3,000 years ago. Visual note: display an illustrated cargo manifest infographic, a labeled diagram of the ship's hold with color-coded zones showing the geographic origin of each cargo type, mapped back to a Mediterranean and Near East chart. Fact number 8. The ancient maritime spice route connected China to East Africa and may have included direct contact between Han Chinese sailors and sub-Saharan Africans, centuries before any European reached either region. Save the most mind-bending for last. In 2010, archaeologists excavating a site on the island of Manda, off the northern Kenyan coast, uncovered a small copper coin. Analysis dated it to the Yongle era of China's Ming dynasty, approximately 1403 to 1424 CE, but the story goes deeper than Ming. Much deeper. Chinese historical records, specifically the chronicles of the Tang dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, and the Song dynasty, 960 to 1279 CE, contain explicit references to East African trade goods, specifically ambergris, ivory, and dragon blood resin, arriving at Chinese ports via Arab intermediaries. More explosively, recent genetic studies published between 2012 and 2021 in journals including Nature and the American Journal of Human Genetics have detected a small but statistically significant signal of East Asian genetic ancestry in populations on the East African coast and specifically in Madagascar, traceable to a founding population event estimated at roughly 830 CE, plus or minus about 170 years. This means that around 830 CE, a group of Southeast Asian or East Asian individuals, almost certainly Austronesian sailors from maritime Southeast Asia, arrived on the East African coast and interbred with local populations, leaving a detectable genetic signature that survives to this day in living people. Madagascar's population is genetically and linguistically Austronesian. Its primary language, Malagasy, is related to languages spoken in Borneo, roughly 4,000 miles away across open ocean. These ancient maritime trade networks were not just moving goods. They were moving people, genes, languages, and entire civilizations across distances and timeframes that make the so-called Age of Discovery look like a very late arrival to a party that had been going on for 2,000 years. Visual note: show a genetic ancestry infographic, pie charts of population genetics for Madagascar and East African coastal groups, with migration arc diagram overlaid on Indian Ocean map showing Austronesian sailing routes from Borneo to East Africa. The ancient world was not a collection of isolated civilizations bumping into each other by accident. It was a living, breathing, globe-spanning commercial and cultural network, moving silk, gold, pepper, amber, copper, ideas, languages, and human beings across distances that should have been impossible with ancient technology. And it was doing it for thousands of years before anyone in Europe claimed to have discovered the world was connected. Roman coins in Japan. Baltic amber in Tutankhamun's tomb. Austronesian DNA in East Africa. Pepper ransoming an empire. These are not anomalies. They are the fingerprints of a world that was always more connected than we were ever taught. Subscribe to Moonlit Minds for daily mind-blowing facts that will change how you see the world.